Hey, I'm Christy, and welcome. We are going to be creating today this butterfly. And it is made out of epoxy clay and then bunches of stuff we stick all over it. And that's one of the reasons why I love this project so much. Epoxy clay is marvelous. It's easy to form and it stays workable for quite a while. You have over an hour of working time, and all you have to do is jam stuff in it and let it dry, and then you have something fabulous. So it's a great way to use all of those little bits and pieces of beads and pottery shards and metal findings and stones that you have lying around in your studio stash right now, waiting to become a butterfly. So won't you join me in my little studio and let's create an epoxy clay butterfly pendant. Come on. First things first, for this project you will need epoxy clay. I recommend the Epoxy Sculpt brand. I really love that, and I just used white for this project, although you could use any color of epoxy clay and it would be super awesome. There's only a few tools that we're going to use. Tweezers to help pick up and place all of the little accents and embellishments. A pickup tool of some kind is very helpful. Something as simple as a white grease pencil pickup tool is terrific, or you can go to something top of the line like a crystal katana. And in a pinch, you can always use a little wad of polymer clay that you form into a little carrot shape to pick things up and place them where they need to go. A paintbrush for adding some powders. A non-stick surface to work on. The little orange thing you see there is a silicone mat, and that's what I use, but you can use anything, any kind of plastic sheet or plastic wrap, anything like that that the epoxy clay will not permanently stick to. 2 eye pins will create hanging loops, and 2 ball-tipped head pins will be antenna. And then it comes down to just embellishments. You can use literally anything because just about everything sticks into epoxy clay nicely. I used some flat back crystals, some green stone chips, some small spiral shells, and some glass tube beads. And the last little vial you see there of that brown stuff, that's powder. I'm using a chalk or pigment powder, pastel powder, something without a shine to it, to cover the surface of the exposed epoxy clay. We'll get to that. But if you have some kind of powder to create the in-between colors, you're going to be very happy. I use kind of a cinnamony or a caramelly kind of brown, and that's what I liked, but it really doesn't matter, whatever makes you happy. All right, gather up these materials and let's begin. Oh, and one more thing. To mix the epoxy clay, it's nice to have a pair of disposable gloves. You don't have to, but it's nice. So if you've got that, that's awesome. And you should have some wet wipes around to keep your fingers and your tools clean. Okay, let's roll. Epoxy clay comes in 2 parts, a part A and a part B, and I'm using a different spoon for each of the 2 parts. So I'm grabbing a little bit of the part A, and then I will get an equal amount of the part B and mix the 2 together. I like to do this with gloved hands because this is a cement and a chemical, and you want to minimize how much contact you have with your skin and chemicals. That's always a wise decision, I think. And there we go. There's a second one. Let's make that the right size. And, you know, it's also like a cement, so even if it wasn't a chemical, you'd be getting all that little cement in the grooves of your fingers, which seems like a dumb idea. All right, so now I have 2 parts, part A, part B, and we are going to mix these thoroughly together. This will activate the process. So once this starts to get mixed up, you will have about an hour of good working time. After that, it starts to get a little too stiff for the things that we're adding to stick really well. Now, depending on the weather, if you're working in a kind of cool environment, then you might have an hour and a half or longer to play with it, and it'll take quite a while to set up this particular epoxy clay, as many epoxy clay take 24 hours to fully cure. But since we're using this as a cement for a mixed media, I'd think about it for a minute, mixed media mosaic assemblage kind of a technique. We really need it to be nice and sticky like this to grab all those fun little accents. So we want to really take advantage of that first hour of time that we have. So if you're not sure if you're going to be able to work that fast, then I would suggest that you work in stages where you do maybe just the body and then the top wings, then the bottom wings, so that you are not feeling rushed or panicked that you might run out of time. So that's a thought. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out some balls of clay for the wings. So these are going to be turned into teardrops and flattened. So it just depends on how big your particular pendant wants to be. But I'm going to say about this size. And let's roll 4 of these balls out for the wings. And I'm just trying to make them be similar in size. All right, so there we have 4 balls, and we're going to have enough left for the body and a little bit of extra. I like having a little bit of extra because then if I end up wanting to add something, I need to boost the height of something or create something on top of something or patch something up, I've always got a little bit to play with. So I'm going to set that aside and put it on a non-stick surface, and then I've got one more little ball that will become the body. Okay, time to take the gloves off, and I would suggest that you have a wet wipe nearby to wipe your fingers as you start to touch the clay. It's not a toxic chemical, although some people are sensitive to it, so be aware of the warning signs with any chemical. If you're feeling weird or tingly or you're getting red or swollen on any kind of chemical, stop. Go outside, get some fresh air, rinse yourself off, and find out more about what's happening to you. But this is a non-toxic surface. You mix it thoroughly. You can touch it with your hands. I just like to have a wet wipe handy to keep my hands and my tools clean. All right, so I'm going to move these little balls out of the way for the moment. And this is just going to be the body. So I'm going to roll this into a bit of a snake shape. And then the wings are going to come off of here. But I want to just not go real fussy with it, okay? And we're not trying to make an anatomically correct butterfly here. I am just making a little blob. And we're going to cover this with some of our green rocks to create the body. And then the wings will be pressed on top or beside or whatever. We're going to work that part out. And then it'll be awesome. So let's just do this first. And what I like to do with something like this is I'll start with my tweezers and I'll pick some of the bigger stones. In this particular mix, I've got some malachite. So I'm going to pick some of the biggest, luscious looking malachites that are here. And I'm going to start kind of placing them down the center. No rhyme or reason, just something fun. And then I'll make some of these other smaller stones around it. Now you notice that my bug body is squishing a little bit, so you want to make sure you don't make it too big to start with, or you're going to end up with a giant slug, which maybe is not the kind of a delicate butterfly look you're going for. Okay, so there's some nice stones there for the body. Let's do one more up in this area. And again, you'll notice I haven't made a big deal about putting the head in or anything like that, so it's mostly just the shape right now. And then you can use your pickup pencil to start placing. Let's grab that. Actually, I'm going to put them over here. They like to stick onto the silicone very nicely, so we'll do it on the tile, then it has more of a chance to be picked up by my pickup pencil, which is just sort of like a little wax tipped pencil. And I'm picking up the darker green ones to work all the way around and fill in all the gaps. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, just working all the different pieces in. You want to just pick up very gently with a pencil. You're not trying to push down with all your strength to pick this up. Just a very light touch works better. Okay, so take a look. What we have is we have a nice butterfly-esque body, and it's, or a moth or something like that, going for a simple body covered with our different stones. All right, that's the first step. At this stage, you're probably thinking, couldn't I just make the body and dump all the stones on and smash them around and then shake it off and whatever's on there is on there? Absolutely you could, and that is definitely a way to do it. I sometimes prefer to kind of place things and then put things around it. Number one, I like the process, but two, it lets me kind of choose the stones that I like the best. But honestly, either way works, so do what you want. It's art. There's no rules. So we're going to use eye pins to hang the piece. And of course you can put one just right in the center of the head if you want and hang it directly from there. I'm going to end up putting them on the edges of the wings because I think that's just a little bit more balanced. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a pair of wire cutters and trim off the extra because I want to use that little bit of wire. So I've got my two little head pins there and I've got that extra bit of wire because we're going to use that to reinforce the top wings. Then the bottom wings are sort of attached to the top wings, so that reinforces itself there. It's not a big deal because the epoxy clay grabs pretty well, but since it's a kind of a delicate grab in here, there's not a whole lot of surface for it to grab. I want to give it a little bit of extra. So I'm going to push this in. Just grab it here and push it in as just like a little bit more of an anchor. Oh, wait a minute. What if you don't have wire cutters? Don't worry, I've got a workaround for you. You can use the eye pins whole. They'll be able to be shoved into the clay, no problem. And you can use any kind of little scrap of wire or even break a toothpick in half to use the little inserts to strengthen the wing connection. Okay? So don't worry about it. You got something that'll work. Anchor. All right, so now I'm going to take my clay and I'm going to roll it into a very simple little teardrop shape and flatten that out with my fingers to make a nice round wing shape. And it's not very thick, as you can see here, about that thick. And if you've got a little bit of cracking going on here, what you can do is just smash that up. That means it just was getting a little bit cold. Warm it up in your hands. So I'm kind of rolling it in a ball in my hands to warm it up. Start with that teardrop shape again and then press it again. And you see, you should have a nice rounded edge now, no cracks. Cool, right? So now I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to place that on that little wire and then squish it onto the body. All right, let's do the same with this. All right, in the center there, push that on and press that on to flatten. Now what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to make both of these wing shapes look similar because you know they change a bit as you're going on. Make them long, about the same length, make the same angle here. So I kind of pushed it down. You can get fancy with this. You know, there's so many kinds of butterflies. You can make their wings as crazy as you like, but I'm going with just like a super simple thing that anybody can do. And I'm also making sure that here, I'm pushing it to grab here, okay? So look at your wings now and see if you need to adjust the shape. You can turn it upside down, and that will help you kind of see if your wings are balanced. And I think those will do. I'm going to wipe my hands now because the hands get full of gunk, and you don't want that. So now, warming up my next little ball of epoxy clay, and I'm going to roll it out into a shape. And you know what we might do? We're going to put that right in there. We might make a little tail on this by just pinching it here. And see how that makes it have like a little bit of a tail? Pinch it here, bulge it up there, and you come up with this kind of shape right there. If you don't want to do that, you do not have to. But I'm pinching, flattening, bulging. So it's kind of a little swallowtail looking thing going on. So I'm going to go ahead and place it right here, right on top of that other wing, letting it come down. It's laying on top of the body a little bit. I think we're looking good. Now the trick will be to make the other one match. And now before we commit to it, let's just gently lay it down and see we're pretty close there. So let's put that on, adjust as needed, and voila. I believe we have a pretty nice looking butterfly shape there. What do you think? Pretty good so far, huh? In the next segment, I'll be using embellishments from my butterfly kit. But if you don't have the same accent bits to use, it's okay. Use anything you like, it will still work. So we're going to be putting the antenna on later, and we're going to be putting the hooks in here. But for now, let's just play with adding some accents. I'm going to start with these wonderful spiral shells. Aren't they beautiful? So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find some that are going to go on the outside edge. And as you will notice, these shells all spiral the same way. Ideally, it'd be nice if one went one way and one went the other way, but that's just not how these shells go. So let's pick two that at least look similar in size and shape. How about those two? That's a match pair if ever I saw a match pair. And I'm just going to press that in. Now, wait, before I put it in, you see how it's very tender and delicate there on the hole? Let's get a little of that extra clay that we had and roll a little snake, and let's shove it inside that hole as far as we can go and get rid of the extra. What this does is going to help make that a little bit more strong so it doesn't like break very easily. But we're going to be shoving it down into the clay anyway, so I don't think I'm going to be worrying too much about that. But it's nice to have that little bit of extra. Okay, press that in. I'm just going to lay this where I want it. I'm thinking right about there. Looks pretty fun. What do you think? Okay, so now I'm going to just press it in, press it in, press the other one in. Sweet. Now I'm thinking that we could also do another one here if you want. And if that seems like too much, then don't. But it would be a nice accent bit right there if you like. So why don't we do that? I kind of like that. I think that looks pretty darn good. Okay. What do you think? I'm kind of liking it. So now let's start adding a few of our tube beads. I think we're going to just put a handful of them out here, and they like to get everywhere, so I'm going to spill them all around. And there's an assortment of colors here. I always like having an assortment here, but what I would like to do is sort of pick out the color I want. And you, of course, can just press anything in, ever how you want. It's no problem. But I'm kind of thinking, you know what I've got a lot of this sort of aqua color. What if I kind of go through and pick out my aquas, and there's some other darker blue. I believe they could live together in harmony. So let's get those together here. And they'll go nice with my greens. So here's a good start. So those, get rid of those now. I'm done with them. They're boring me. And now let's get the rest of the aquas over here. And let's start with that. That way we can kind of keep just one color going on. So I'm going to start by come back, picking these up and placing them in a line. And I'm going to do one on one side, one on the other, so it stays a bit symmetrical. That way if I've made a choice, I can make a similar choice. So let's just create the long line running up the center, kind of towards the body. With any luck, they'll both end in a similar way. Okay, I like that. How about you? Let's put a second line, and you notice that I'm pressing this in so that this one is in the middle of those two. Otherwise, you get kind of a funky thing where it's they all start lining up and the cracks all line up, and then your eye looks at the lines going that way, which we don't want to do. So let's get a few more of these turquoisey ones and put a few more of those there. And again, I'm pressing them, gently putting them in place with my tweezers and then pressing them down with my finger. All right, now we can introduce another color if you like, and since we used greens already, putting a little green one here would not go amiss, I think. I should have checked to see that I had the same green. That should do. Okay, great. All right, let's stop there for the moment. Now, I'm thinking that we're going to want to maybe make another little line in here and maybe a line up here. This is pretty straight, so the next line might want to curve a little bit more. So let's pull our greens and let's see what we've got going on in the green department. Well, let's start here and do a little line like this. Here. All right, since the green wants to be used, I'm going to put that in there. And how about that? For now, let's just leave it at that. Now let's come back and do some lines up here. So see what we've done is now we've made some of the lines pulling the eye out from the center into the wing. Pressing down. Looking pretty good. Now, you know what bothers me a little bit? That these lines here are very, very straight. I feel like our butterfly would want to curve a little bit more. So I'm actually going to curve this a little bit, which will curve those lines a little bit more too. Isn't that a little bit better? Yeah, I thought so too. Too straight, not good. Okay, what do you think so far? Okay, so I'm not done with tube beads yet. What I'm going to do now is pick out these yellows. And let's do a little bit of fun with our yellow. Maybe we can add one yellow here, kind of fill in that gap. All right. And then what if we continue our yellows around the edge here, get some continuity. All right, so those continue the line. I think that looks pretty good. Why don't we put maybe another one here? Now I have this one that's going over the edge just a little, so let me tuck that in so it stays put. All right, so now we've got a pretty full pattern, I think. I rather like that. Now we're going to play with putting a couple of crystals in. All right, our AB crystals. Let's just spread those around. I like these. And this is going to fill in a lot of the gaps. So I've got an assortment here of sizes. I love getting crystals in assorted sizes. These are glass rhinestones, as I mentioned. I'm going to start with the very biggest ones, and I'm going to put, bam, right here for those two. Okay. And another one here. That should be okay. And now we can go to a smaller one. And let's take some smaller ones maybe and fill in here. And I'm still going to go by that pattern where I put one on one side and then one on the other side, just to keep things balanced. So this one is just completely up to you what you think looks nice and how you want to fill it in. You can fill in the entire surface with crystals. You know, why not? That can be very fun. Or you can just modify it and do a few. I'm going to do a few and then some texture, and then we're going to put some powders on. So I'm just deciding where those few are and which ones enhance the design. All right, I'm liking what I see so far, and I think there's a couple things we can do. I would resist the impulse to use more of this stone on the wing area. We want that to kind of set off and look a little different. Although that is something you could do, and there are some like peridot chips in here, so if you wanted to bring a few of those lighter colored stones around to mimic the body, absolutely, that would be fine. I kind of want to just make a ridge of crystals all along here to separate the top and the bottom wing. I think that might be the nicest thing, just to kind of get that line re-emphasized. So let's see if we can do that next. How about now we're going to put on a little bit of texture and then get to our powders. So we're going to do texture and powder, but let's first put in our hardware. I forgot about that, and let's not forget about that. So the first thing we've got are the little hooks for hanging. And all this is a little eye hook, and because this is a glue, you don't need to do anything more than just take the eye hook, eye pin, I should say, and just press it in. And I usually like to press it flush to the edge of the, let me make sure I'm matched here, hang on. Okay, I think that's about right. I like to get it sort of flush right up to the, embedded itself a little bit into the epoxy clay so that it has a really nice grab. I don't want it, you know, dangling out there. I want it to be nice and firm. That does mean that there's not much there, so you're just going to need a little jump ring when it comes time to hang that. But that will work, I think. And then we've got some head pins here, and what I like to do is just sort of give them a little bit of a bend so that they've got a bit of curve to them. And you don't have to do a hook or anything like that to hold these things in. They're just going to mush into the clay and stay because it is a glue, as we said, and it's going to grab onto it. So I'm just going to push that in. And you can make these be as long as you like or as short as you like. I'm just going to force that in. And there we go. Now, doesn't that make a big difference once the antenna get in there? You kind of really need to have that to make it look good. All right, so now I'm going to put some texture on here. There's a couple of choices that you have on adding the texture. You can use the back of your, in fact, I'll just do this on here, the back of your brush. I'm using this because this comes in the kit, but most everybody's got a paintbrush, and you can just use this to press little indentations like dimples, and you just keep getting it wet with your wet wipe, because what that does is it makes sure that buildup of the epoxy clay doesn't start getting on the end of the tool, in this case the end of the paintbrush, and building up and then start grabbing, and it doesn't release very well and it starts getting messy. This is a nice decorative way of adding some little dimples around the outside edge. So we're going to go like that on here and here with this particular thing. Now obviously you can have a full range of sculpting tools. I have some very favorites. In fact, I carry them in my online store. My very favorite one is this Wow It's Awesome tool, and I use this constantly for texture and for sculpting, but I'm wanting to make sure that I show you how to do this with just things that you've got easily around the house. If you don't have, if you're not used to sculpting and you don't have a whole bunch of tools, you can still make do with toothpicks and the edges of paintbrushes and other fun things like that. It doesn't have to be difficult. If you bought the kit, everything that you need is in the kit, and you don't have to worry about a whole bunch of extra tools. So there you go. All right, so I'm going to do that up on this side too. And I'm trying to make those patterns somewhat random. I don't want it to look too much like it's lined up, because that's never a very good look. I think it looks too uniform without being precise enough to be pleasing. So there we go. So we've got some dimples there. And now you just have to look at the rest and go, okay, I don't necessarily want to put those dots on everything. So what do I want to do? So this is something where you can use a little toothpick or something like that. I'm actually going to just use, I have a knitting needle, but this could be a toothpick. And I'm just going to take this and just draw some little lines in all of the rest of the spaces. And it would be like rays of the sun if the body was the sun. All right, so it would just be following those lines going out, you know, like butterflies do, kind of have the veins and everything that kind of spread outwards. That's just what I'm doing here. I'm just making a little bit of lines. The reason is we're going to put some powder on the rest of the surface of the clay, but it leaves there not being some big fat area like this with nothing going on. This gives it like some grooves for that powder to fit into, and I think that looks better. And it does have a very butterfly-esque feel to it that way. And I'm just trying to get my tool everywhere. Like I said, you can use a toothpick. I'm using just a little knitting needle. If you have a needle tool, that can work too. You just want to have a light touch so you don't have too much scratchings going on everywhere. All right, so there's a little bit of texture in the rest of the area. I feel like the texture is quite full now. All we've got to do is put our powder on. All right, so this is just a pigment powder, and I have just a very small bit in a vial. Again, this is something that I did for the kit, so you didn't have to have a whole bunch of it, and you can just dip your paintbrush right in there, and I'm just going right over the surface of the butterfly and filling in all the gaps, which means that he becomes a sort of a brownish butterfly, and that helps all the other things stick out really nicely. Right now, some of that powder is getting on the surface of all the shells and all the other stuff, but that's okay. That's not permanent. That's just the way it is. And you can go down into the cracks and the grooves if you want. I'm going to show you a little trick, and part of the reason why we did the little indentations here. You'll see in just a second. It's kind of cool. But you can leave it exactly like that. And obviously you could have used mica powder if you wanted it shiny and shimmery. I love the contrast of the brown earthiness with the shine. And we're going to and you notice that I'm shoving it down on, I'm kind of like pounding it into the cracks here instead of just like la 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 sweeping over the surface. Get bold with it. Okay. So now you have a lot of extra powder floating around. You want to remove that before we get to the next step. I would recommend that instead of like blowing it and creating all that dust to be in your breathing environment, that you use a wet wipe and gently remove that excess powder. We're going to continue to use the wet wipe for the next part, so you probably want to have a couple on hand for that. Start wiping the surface. And I'm actually even wiping it off, and I keep moving it around because it's going to build up. You want to be gentle because you don't want to smush anything, and you can wipe it off the surface of your shells and whatnot. But what I'm also doing is I'm wiping it off the surface, and if you want to get a bit more water on here, if your wet wipe is not real soppy wet, you can get a little bit more, and that will help wipe it off faster. But the wet wipe is good for this kind of thing because look at that, it's starting to take it right off the surface, and it's almost making an antiquing thing going on. You see how that goes? And it's really making all those lines that you made really stand out. And if you start wiping off more than you meant to, you can always let it dry a little bit, put another layer of powder on, and do it again. Okay, getting down in this little bit of the crack here, I'm going to wad up my wet wipe and turn it into a little bit of a wedge. That way I can kind of get in between those wings, and hopefully that will look good. And if it doesn't, I'll just put more powder in. But this is sort of like antiquing the cheating way, which I love cheating as long as nobody gets hurt, and I love the look of an antiqued thing. You know, grew up in the 70s, so I kind of have that stuck in my brain, but I do like how that looks. Okay, what do you think about that? So now we have almost like a faux ivory kind of thing going on. I feel like there's a little bit of more powder that could be here. I brushed off a little more than I want, so let's put just a little bit back. This was looking a little bald there too, but you know, just a little touch up. All right, kids, what do you think about that? How do you like our lovely butterfly? We're going to let this completely dry. It takes 24 hours for it to completely harden. Then you can come back and you can continue to wipe off anything else that you feel like needed to be cleaned up a bit. We'll do that after everything's had a chance to set. Then we'll peel it off this backing, which happens no problem at all, and it'll be ready to hang up with some jump rings and chain or whatever you've got going on, and it will be done. But what do you think? I think that turned out great, don't you? Ta-da! You're done. Wasn't that fun and easy? And doesn't it make you want to just gather up more materials and make a whole flock of butterflies? You should do that. And if for some reason you don't have enough stuff in your stash, because don't we all just need more stuff, I have created quite a number of sort of curated collections of mosaic-y goodness. Little bits and interesting pieces that I found along the way that I think are quite exciting that you can add to your next creation. So go check out my store, ChristyFriesen.com, and take a look at all of the different things that I have. Make sure when you drag on that little buy button, store button, that you notice that there's several different categories. I've got interesting things not only in my store, but in my found objects area that you might be interested in looking at. So have fun shopping, have fun creating, have fun butterflying.